Welcome to the third dimension. In recent years, Iran has increased investment in the Houthi militia, raising speculation that the Houthis will evolve into another proxy that serves to protect and promote Iranian interest. Tehran has frequently turned to sponsor proxy relationships to expand its reach in the Middle East and antagonize its adversaries while minimizing the risk of inviting direct conflict. While the recent normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran increased optimism for end to the fighting in Yemen, international observers warn that more inclusive and extensive efforts are still needed to reach a sustainable resolution to the conflict. To discuss the Iranian influence in fueling the Yemeni crisis, join me from Washington, D.C., Adrian Calamel. Adrian is a terrorism and Middle Eastern analyst. He is fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute and the author of the book, The Forthcoming of Hezbollah. Welcome to the third dimension, Adrian.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. Before getting into the dynamics of this conflict, Adrian, okay, while going through your bio, I came to know that you lost one of your best friends because of terrorism, and in the same way, Yemenis on a daily basis die because of the Houthi terrorism backed by Iran. What do you say about this?
What I have to say about this is for Americans, back in 2001, September 11th, this became very real for Americans because we've not experienced terrorism, at least on the home soil, of that magnitude. Now, what you look at and what you see in Yemen and the use of terrorists, the Houthis are a terrorist organization. I will qualify them as being that. I can't imagine what the people of Yemen have gone through. I know what their tactics are, and this has been a lifelong. I've been a watcher of terrorism for a long time. I focused on Hezbollah before I went back in. I was in the business world. Decided to go back to academia after September 11th. Got my master's in Middle Eastern history, focusing on the history of the Middle East, and then I had always been a reader of terrorism and focusing on Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and at the end of the day, what I realized is that this new modern age of terrorism, all roads seem to lead back to the Islamic Republic in Tehran. So that's kind of my view on this. So I've been very hyper-focused on Hezbollah, on the Islamic Republic, and how they use their proxies.
Okay. We'll come to that in details. Okay. Now, if we would like to describe the current state of affairs in Yemen, Adrian, and perhaps it would be interesting to quote the UN Special Envoy in his last briefing before the UN Security Council describing the current situation. He says, I quote, "The situation on the ground is fragile and challenging, and the front lines are not silent." What is your take on this?
Yeah, that's an understatement. The American envoy, I look at this, and this is an envoy under the Biden administration, and what I have seen them do with the looking at the situation, they've been trying to insert themselves in the peace process. Everybody's trying to get some type of ceasefire, some type of lasting resolution that'll bring an end to the fighting. But on the other hand, this is a country that's been ravaged by war. You can go back to even 2004 during the early insurgencies, the Houthis, but then really picking up in earnest from 2011, excuse me, from the Arab Spring. up until the present, this is a war-torn country. It is in one of the, it was before the Arab Spring and before the Houthis blitzkrieg through the country. This was one of Yemen is one of the most impoverished, was one of the most impoverished nations in the Middle East, and then to have this uh, over a decade long war that, as you said, is not silent on the fronts. There is activity around the margins that we just don't hear about. So fragile. I just, yeah, it's extremely fragile. But that's the way the Houthis want it. And they want everybody on the edge.
Okay. Now, of course, Adrian, you followed with us the breakthrough of the what we call Saudi-Iranian rapprochement on the 10th of March. Okay. If I may ask, to what extent can such agreement between the two key regional powers help to support peace in Yemen?
Great question. I've been very skeptical of this for quite some time. First, the Saudis and the Islamic Republic and this rapprochement and this normalization that you would see, I really do see it as being a byproduct of the American administration and the way they've handled this situation, especially in dealing with the Islamic Republic. There has been a real push over 3 administrations to tilt the scales in the Middle East, or at least to, let's say, give the Islamic Republic the ability to enrich a nuclear weapon. And they're at that capacity where their breakout is very near. So the Saudis are really having to hedge their bets, and they realize that they may have to be, they're going to be dealing with a very antagonistic neighbor next door. And I think they really got pushed into this this arrangement, this rapprochement with the Iranians, with the Islamic Republic. I don't expect it to last. What I do see is that my view on this is that the Saudis know what they're dealing with. They know the Islamic Republic. They know that they don't negotiate in good faith, that they continuously break any type of agreements that are put into place, they will break them. And I see this as a purely tactical and a not strategic. And then if you look at the negotiations, it's very odd, I find, that the negotiations have come to a point where the Houthis are putting these ridiculous maximalist demands on Saudi Arabia that they tried to put on the Republic of Yemen government. And that's kind of where we are right now. With these regional negotiations, I looked also at what are the Houthis looking to gain out of this? And what I'm seeing and what I think is this is a war on two fronts, at least two fronts. I would say multiple fronts. And what they want to do, from my perspective, is isolate, or at least stop, close off the front from Saudi Arabia so they can isolate the STC and the Presidential Council.
Yeah. Okay. So again, within the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, just a month after that, Adrian, we saw a Saudi delegation in Sana'a for the first time. Okay. Now the question is, was it this kind of rapprochement that has led to or has made the Saudis do this step?
I don't know what prompted the Saudis to do this. I think they're just taking some baby steps. First of all, to go and meet in Sana'a and to meet with the Houthis and to try and hammer out some negotiations and There have also been Western leaders that have been traveling to Sana'a as well. There's at least 4 recorded trips on the books of Western officials trying to make this trip to Sana'a to talk to the Houthis. And when the Saudis go there, where's the Yemeni representation? I hear everybody saying we want to do what's best in the interest of the Yemeni people, but it almost looks like negotiations that happened, let's say, in Afghanistan, where there was no representative from the Afghan government. There was the U.S. and it was the Taliban negotiation.
Yeah.
That was a negotiation. So I find it very problematic. How the Saudis get there, I think they're just playing a game. Right now, they're, swapping prisoners and swapping dead bodies. That's not progress as far as peace goes. That's just exchanges after a war. And we already see there's fraying of this relationship already.
Okay. Now, if we move to the core issue of this interview, Adrian, which is Iran and Iran's influence in Yemen, okay, it would be interesting to bring in Elizabeth Kindle. She says, Iran's involvement in Yemen is beyond doubt. The difficulty lies in separating the rhetoric from the real activity. The question is, what is, as an expert in Iran and Hezbollah, what is the size and the scope of the real Iranian involvement in the Yemeni crisis?
It is very large, and it's gone back a very long time. And so when people try to say that this is just a very recent, or this is something, the Houthi Islamic Republic relationship is something that we've just experienced, let's say in the late 90s going into 2000, that's false. Tehran and IRGC crafted the Houthis on the Hezbollah model. This process of indoctrination and militarization dates back to the late 1980s. You have Hussein al-Houthi spent significant time in Tehran, admirer of the Islamic Revolution, spent time in the Bekaa Valley, which the Hezbollah calls home. And I should also mention that they were in the Sudan in 1994 when that whole country was just one giant terrorist training camp run by the IRGC and Hezbollah. So this goes back a very, very long way. That's the one thing that I want to point out. It's not just something that happened overnight. There's also the one thing about the Houthis that in the Hezbollah model is that compared to, let's say, in Iraq, where you have multiple militias that are vying for Tehran's attention, in Yemen, you just have the Houthis. And that makes them a cohesive unit, which is dangerous. They are also people will say that they have agency, that they can do what they want to. I say they don't have much agency. They are pretty much subservient to the Islamic Republic. Yes, they can do some things, but in many cases, they have to run it past them. The other part, people focus so much on the military hardware, and rightfully so. That's showing up on the battlefield shipments and tracing it back to the Islamic Republic. That's one way. And you can also look at their tactics, increasing use of explosive laden, the suicide drones that we see showing up on the battlefield in the Ukraine, showing up in Yemen before they showed up in the Ukraine, showing up in Israel, showing up off the Red Sea. So they're using these military shipments. So increasing use of explosive drones. And what that means to me is, and what it's been well chronicled, is that there's been advanced parts shipped in from the Islamic Republic. Yeah. And then at the same time, you have domestic production sites. Okay. So they take domestic goods with the advanced parts. And to set up those type of, you need factories, you need production sites, let's say. And that's where you see Hezbollah. that's where you see them training individuals. There is video that has come out of Hezbollah training Houthi militias and arming suicide drones at the Sana'a airport.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. And I just want to talk about the IRGC Quds Force. As early as 2005, the Houthis were working off an IRGC playbook on clearing and seizing cities.
Okay. So
All right.
if I may step in, Adrian, here, as you're talking about the long history bonds between Houthis and Iran, okay, you still remember the first wars from 2004 to 2010 when President Saleh was there. And the question is, President Saleh used to tell US officials that Houthis are linked to Iran hundreds of times, but his calls were undermined by American policymakers. Okay, how do you interpret this?
Well, the problem is one, American foreign policy has been notoriously inconsistent. Now, in 2004, I can't remember, but if the Houthis were on the foreign terrorist organization list, I don't believe they were at that point. They absolutely should have been listening to Saleh because they are connected. I will say that our agencies, the CIA especially, in many cases has become politicized, and this hurts national security and intelligence. There has been a real effort to disconnect the dots leading back to the Islamic Republic, or disconnecting the dots that connect, let's say, Al-Qaeda to the Islamic Republic, which not many people see. So I think this is just maybe a failure on our intelligence community, a failure to listen, and really hubris not to listen to a leader who is in that country and knows this.
Yeah, okay. Now, if we move to another point, Adrian, which is the militarization of Yemen's water, especially the Red Sea, okay? And the US Special Envoy, Tim Lindeking, said that despite the Saudi-Iranian rapprochement, Iran has continued to supply the Houthis with weapons and narcotics. So, in your point of view, okay, is Tehran really committed to any peace process in Yemen?
No, they're not, plain and simple. Yemen is the last piece of their completion of what they envision as the Shia Crescent to hem in the Gulf states. Now they have the ability to threaten the Red Sea, and they are threatening the Red Sea. We can go over the details. Before, it was the Strait of Hormuz. So now they have the ability to shut down international shipping. Now, the Strait of Hormuz, that's going to definitely affect things. And the U.S. has sent another destroyer and some F-35s over to the region. So it doesn't look like it's de-escalating. And the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, that is such a narrow choke point. And for those who aren't familiar with geography, if you cut that off, what you do is you cut off the Suez Canal and you affect the global economy. So they have the ability then to affect international commerce. And I look at the Islamic Republic's pillars for what they want to do in the Red Sea is, one, test different methods, different tactics, different missiles as a testing ground. Two, creates instability and make it very difficult for people coming through there. And finally, it's to control and put pressure and hem in the countries such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, and those countries.
Okay. Now, if we just bring in the U.S. policy we hear now and then about the US Navy seizing weapons, Iranian weapons meant to the Houthis. The question is this the only thing that superpowers like the US or the United Kingdom, and now recently France, okay, can do to curb this kind of Iranian insurgents?
It's not the only thing that they can do, but right now we're looking at, in the Western capitals, in London, in Paris, in DC, and we'll even go to Berlin, they are very risk averse. And whenever we talk about the Houthis, and you got to keep this in the back of your mind, you have to think about what the bigger policy is related to the Islamic Republic, because it's connected. And right now you have 3-4 countries that are chasing the Islamic Republic to sign a really, really bad nuclear deal that will give them a lot of money, and that will pay for the Houthis, that will end up in their coffers, that will pay for the salaries of their fighters. So U.S. foreign policy right now, and Western foreign policy, yeah, they can seize shipments, absolutely. But we're at a phase right now, and this war is multiple phases. You mentioned 2004 to 2010, and I look at that as being the first phase. And then I look at the second phase being 2011 to the present. What's this next phase going to look like? Because there is another phase coming after it. And the West needs to be less reactionary and more proactive. So, yes, they can seize weapons, but are they seizing all the weapons? Yeah. Are they going into the Red Sea and looking around and seeing that there are Iranian boats that are they're disguised as fishing boats, but they're listening stations to coordinate Houthi maritime activities in the Red Sea? Yeah. So these are the type of things. There needs to be a more robust, it just can't be seizing weapons.
Okay. Final thing about question, Adrian, okay. In the end of the day, and as a specialist in Iran, Hezbollah, and all these extremist groups, the question is peace still possible with the Houthis? Are they ready to share power?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They will not share power. They may share power for a term, for a short period. I don't know if they will, but the long-term goal is to control the country. That is the long-term goal. And I hate to quote Trotsky, but as he said, you may not want war, but war wants you. And the Houthis want war. They are in a holding pattern right now where they need to replenish their ranks, reload, and reposition. And the Islamic Republic is also dealing with a lot of internal issues. So I think this is just them calculating pause, ceasefire, which actually, I mean, reload and go back at it again. So the West, in my opinion, needs to get in front of this right now and realize that there is going to be another offensive coming. There absolutely is.
Okay. With that remark, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much, Adrian, for your time and for your insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's all for this time. See you next week with a new edition of The Third Dimension.